This is Pastor Don Long, and here we are once again in our Jewish Roots broadcast as we're looking over these weeks at a recent trip we had to Israel, talking about how the Shamron is found in the Bible and the cities that we visit there, how much they are a part of the Bible. Last week I had Desi with me. This week we have Unique. Hi, Unique. How are you?
Hello. Awesome.
So let me see. 2014 was your first trip to Israel.
It was.
Yeah, were you excited about that?
Yes, I was very excited.
Yeah. Tell us about, this was your first trip on an airplane?
Yes, it was.
Wow. And how old are you, Unique?
I'm 14.
14, so you were 13 then.
Yes.
And you went with your mom.
Yes.
And you guys came on a trip to Israel with us. Let me ask you a question I had asked Desi, but people will say about going to Israel, aren't you afraid to go to Israel? Did you ever feel like you were afraid or anything over there?
No, I never felt afraid.
Was it was a very peaceful place in many ways, right?
Yes.
So we flew into Tel Aviv. We landed there at the airport, got on that plane, went to the Shamron, to outside the city of Ariel, at the only hotel in the area, which is a Shel HaShamron. What did you think about that hotel, by the
It was
way?
an awesome hotel, and they had the most beautiful garden I've ever seen.
It was. How about that swimming pool? That was
Yes,
huge,
it
right?
was huge.
Yeah. And what did they, let me see, they had what are the, that exhibit they have out there about the life
The
of the
biblical
Bible?
gardens.
Yeah.
They have a biblical gardens there, and you walk through it, and it's all different types of the patriarchs. They have the tabernacle set up. It's very interesting to see the different things. They have crossing the Red Sea.
Wow.
They have the sea parting and all. It's really, really cool. It's an experience that I would never forget.
Well, I'm sure you won't. And last week we were talking about going to Alon Moray. Let me ask you what you remember about going to Alon Moray.
It was so pretty up there. You walk up the hill and you see this oak tree that they say Abraham that could be from Abraham's time. And then you look out, and the best way to describe it is a painter's palette. All the different greens and browns and yellows are all there, and it's so beautiful.
It is. We're looking over that valley. Remember where Abraham would have come down that valley? Mm-hmm. People say, well, how do you know? Because that's the main valley that goes from the east, comes through what is now Jordan, and comes to that place. But last week we talked about the fact that the Bible in Genesis, in 5 different locations, says, and he came to Shechem. And Shechem is the city that we were looking down at when we were up at Alon Moray. Shechem is now known by most people as Nablus, and it's a Palestinian city. It's, in fact, Jewish people are not allowed to even travel there except on special days to go to Joseph's tomb there. And we finished last week talking about the fact that after we left Alon Moray, we went to Shiloh. What's Shiloh all about?
Shiloh is where the Ark of the Covenant and the Tabernacle were for 400 years, and then they moved on, obviously. Shiloh is a very important place in Jewish history because it has all the archaeology from the Tabernacle. Mm-hmm. There's also a town there that we saw. And also at Shiloh, they have this movie that you can watch talking about the history of Shiloh. It was very interesting.
Was actually, we go there, and Shiloh is now, they've unearthed the actual city or village of Shiloh. Was always a mound in the years before you went there. We would go there, and we're just walking over this mound, and underneath is this big city. But there is the site where the original tabernacle was, and around it are the hills where at these special occasions like Passover, the people would gather, and you could almost imagine them, couldn't you, sitting on those hills, looking down at the tabernacle there while the priests were officiating, and they're celebrating their Passover meal there. Shiloh, of course, is where Samuel grew up, being the first prophet of Israel in that sense. Shiloh is where the people gathered, and therefore for 400 years it really was the presence of God. And what is it that Pastor Donna teaches us about places like that?
That there's open portals there, and that God's presence is really there. You can actually really feel it.
An open portal being a place where God had encountered his people, where God spoke to his people, and that all over Israel there are these portals in time and space. You know, Yeshua said when he was coming into Jerusalem, remember the Pharisees were criticizing him on what the church calls Palm Sunday. But as he came in and the people were waving their banners and their palm branches, and the priest said to them, the Pharisees said, "Tell your disciples to be quiet." And do you remember what Yeshua said?
He said, if they are quiet, then the stones will cry out.
Even the stones will cry out. And we would think, well, yeah, that's just a figure of speech. But we've learned that so-called inanimate objects, stones and buildings, actually retain the sounds that were around them. So knowing that scientifically, that's not a spiritual thing, that's a scientific thing. Knowing that when we're in Shiloh, think about it, we're in a place where the sounds of the shofar, the sounds of the sacrifices, those sounds were penetrating those hills for over 400 years. When we go there now, that sense of God's presence is still there. Could you tell the difference, for example, being in Shiloh and just driving by any mountain?
Yeah, there's a big difference.
Big difference in what was there. And so Shiloh becomes a place where we celebrate the events that God does. Shiloh is a place where Hannah is known for. Do you remember what Hannah's connection is with Shiloh?
Yes. Hannah asked God for a child because she was childless, and she got it, and the boy was named Samuel.
So she went to Shiloh. She's praying to God, "Would you bless me with a child?" And Eli, the priest, blesses her. She goes home and comes back a year later, having the child has been born. Our church had an experience of that, didn't we? With Scott and Sherry. They were in Shiloh one year. That was a trip you didn't make, but they were there, and they prayed to have a child and came back, and the very next year they were back in Shiloh with a child.
Yes.
Amazing, huh? Mm-hmm. Those are exciting things. So Shiloh is a time when we go as a group where we always try to, if there's something special to do, we want to do it at Shiloh. This year we had the dedication of a marriage of a couple that got married in February. We've had, Aunt Jordan always does a dance or two or three worship dances there that we film at Shiloh. I know you and your mom had a special time at Shiloh, a time we try to have times of reconciliation. Why would we do that at Shiloh?
Because God's presence is everywhere, but there is just extra special because His presence was there for so long, and it's still there. It's like if you close your eyes, you can feel it.
That's right, and it's like, whoa, we're in the presence of God. It's not like we're just looking at history. It's like that history has become alive right now. And so it's a great place to be. But Shiloh is mentioned in the Bible in many places. Let me share with you in the audience some of the things about Shiloh. In Joshua chapter 18, verse 1, it says, "The whole assembly of the Israelites gathered at Shiloh and set up the tent of meeting there." In 1 Samuel chapter 1, it says, "Year after year this man went up from his town to worship and sacrifice to the Lord Almighty at Shiloh." In 1 Samuel chapter 3, verse 20, it says, "And all Israel from Dan," that would be in the north, "to Beersheba," that would be in the south, recognized that Samuel was attested as a prophet of the Lord. The Lord continued to appear at Shiloh. There's the Bible again unique, telling us that God appeared. His presence was made known at Shiloh. And in 1 Samuel chapter 4, verses 4 to 11, it talks about the fact of the Ark of the Covenant being taken from Shiloh to go into battle. When we get all the way over into the prophets, in the book of Jeremiah, chapter 7, this is what is said there. "Go now to the place in Shiloh where I first made a dwelling for my name." See what God's saying? That's where He first made a dwelling. So when God said to Abram, "All of this land is yours," and He said to Jacob, "All of this land is yours," when He promised the people, "This is your land," and we've taught here that it is God's land to give to the Jew, that all of this belongs to Israel. But when He went in with the people, He said, "Shiloh is where I first made a dwelling for my name," was in Shiloh. In verse 14 it says, therefore what I did to Shiloh I will now do to the house that bears my name, if you don't turn back to me. So it's a prophetic warning. But the point of Jeremiah is saying that Shiloh is the first place that the God of the Bible said, this is where I place my name. Now, what's the second and therefore the last place that he's placed his name?
Jerusalem.
Jerusalem, all right? So this is interesting. I know, Unique, you're pretty passionate about supporting Israel.
Yes.
And we promised Andrew we wouldn't get excited and bang on the table and things like that. But the world knows that area. They call it the West Bank.
Yes.
And we've taught on this broadcast how if you look at the Jordan River going down, that during the British Mandate, Britain was given all of both sides of the Jordan, this sizable territory, and they were given all of that to be a land for the Jews.
Mm-hmm.
And do you recall what one of the first things Britain did with all that land?
Yes, they gave some to the Arabs. It's now Transjordan.
That's right. They gave 3/4 of it, in fact.
A big chunk.
Big chunk, right, to of each side of Jordan to what was called Transjordan. It's now known as Jordan. So when you look at a map today and you see Jordan, that is land that Britain unilaterally gave to create a nation when in fact the United Nations said it didn't belong to Britain to give it away. So if you want to really know who owns the land, the Jewish people are supposed to have the land on both sides of the Jordan. If you look at that, anything on the west side of the Jordan then was remaining for Israel.
Yes.
Well, then of course we know the world tried to even divide that further. And at the War of Independence, when all the Arab nations had decided to destroy Israel, even at its birth, Israel won that.
Yes.
And
Against all odds.
Against all odds. And then there's this border that appeared. They call it the Green Line today.
Yes.
Is that a border?
No.
What is it?
It's a truce line.
A truce line. They're very good. It's a truce line. It's simply where the War of Independence, 1948, stopped.
That's where they signed the truce.
That's right. And it's a line that is to be negotiated.
Mm-hmm.
So when people say that Israel needs to move back beyond the 1967 border,
There was none.
it was not a border, okay? So that area is under dispute, that area that the world's fighting about, that area that the world wants to give to the creation of a new Palestinian state.
They got plenty of them.
They sure do.
They don't need one more.
They don't need another Palestinian or Arab nation. They've got plenty of them. That West Bank, what does the Bible call that?
Judea and Samaria.
Judea and Samaria. And so when we look in our Bible, if you were to look in your Bible, you would find that all the area that the world wants to give away is the biblical heartland. And I want to read something. Listen to this from Ezekiel. It says, Son of man, prophesy to the mountains of Israel and say, O mountains of Israel, hear the word of the Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says. The enemy said of you, Aha, the ancient heights have become our possession. Therefore, prophesy and say, This is what the sovereign Lord says, because they ravaged and hounded you from every side, so that you became the possession of the rest of the nations, and the object of people's malicious talk and slander. Therefore, O mountains of Israel, hear the word of the sovereign Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says to the mountains and hills, to the ravines and valleys, to the desolate ruins and the deserted towns that have been plundered and ridiculed by the rest of the nations around you. This is what the sovereign Lord says. In my burning zeal, I have spoken against the rest of the nations, against all Edom, for with glee and with malice in their hearts, they made my land their own possession, so that they might plunder its pasture land. Therefore, prophesy concerning the land of Israel, and say to the mountains and hills, ravines and valleys, This is what the sovereign Lord says. I speak in my jealous wrath, because you have suffered the scorn of the nations. Therefore, This is what the sovereign Lord says. I swear with uplifted hand that the nations around you will also suffer scorn. But you, O mountains of Israel, will produce branches and fruit for my people Israel, for they will soon come home. I'm concerned for you and will look on you with favor. You will be plowed and sown, and I will multiply the number of people upon you. Speaking to the mountains of Israel, even the whole house of Israel. The towns will be inhabited and the ruins rebuilt. I will increase the number of men and animals upon you, and they will be fruitful and become numerous. I will settle people on you as in the past, and will make you prosper more than ever before. Then you will know that I am the Lord. I will cause my people Israel, to walk upon you. They will possess you, and you will be their inheritance. You will never again deprive them of their children. Whoa.
And you definitely see that. It's like living history.
When you see the mountains of Israel is Judea and Samaria, and they were all empty. If you went back to 1930s, before the War of Independence,
Look at pictures, it's nothing.
there's nothing there. And when we travel through the West Bank,
Plenty.
Judea and Samaria, what do you see?
Plenty of things there. Houses and cities. They're not really settlements. They're cities and towns. And you see children playing in their playgrounds and running on the street. It's definitely not barren.
It's not barren. It's like I read this in Ezekiel, and then I look and I see houses being built, and I see new communities being built on the mountains. The Bible says that Israel is supposed to settle the mountains of Judea and Samaria. That is what the world calls the West Bank. So the Bible's very clear. All of Israel belongs to Israel, but especially the mountains, and it's the mountains that the world wants to take away. Isn't that amazing? Now, you know, if you open your Bible and you look in your Bible, you'll find that some of the very name places that you, a reader of the Bible, would think, oh yeah, that belongs to Israel. Listen, Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Bethany, Hebron, Ai, Bethel, Shiloh, Shechem, Jericho, all these names that we know in our Bible, of course that's Israel.
It's in the West Bank.
It's in the West Bank.
So they should have it.
So they should have it. Pretty
Not
simple.
that hard.
No, it's not that hard to think about, is it? The mountains of Israel are, in fact, the very place that you cannot give away if you're going to honor God. Now, there's another prophecy unique, and I'm going to read it. And let's see if you did anything in your life over there in your time that relates to this. Jeremiah chapter 31, 4 through 5, it says this: I will build you up again, and you will be rebuilt, O virgin Israel. Again, you will take up your tambourine and go out to dance with the joyful. Again, you will plant vineyards on the hills of Samaria. The farmers will plant them and enjoy their fruit. Well, did you do anything like this?
Yes, I planted a tree in the West Bank, or the Shomron. We planted a tree so that the elderly could have some shade when they're walking in a park.
That's where it was. We've done it every time we go there. We do this because we fulfill biblical prophecy. So you can read the Bible and say, hey, I'm a part of the fulfillment of that prophecy to plant vineyards or to plant olive groves or to plant fruit trees in Samaria is to do what God said is going to happen. And you're right. This year we went to that, it was like what, a little walkway there?
A little walk-in park.
Yeah, walk-in park, but there were no shade trees there.
And the elderly would go, and it would be too hot for them. So we planted some trees. In a couple years, there'll be plenty of shade for them.
That's cool. That's cool. So our little group was there, dug in the ground. They had the plants for us to put in there. They were pretty tall. They were as tall as you are, and pomegranates and I don't know whether peach trees, orange. I don't know what other kinds there were, but a lot of fruit trees. In the past, sometimes we planted olive vines. Sometimes we've planted, different kinds of crops. But so you were part of biblical prophecy. Wow, that's pretty exciting, I think.
And I also got to plant a kiwi tree in Malkia.
Ah, so that's a different trip that we took. if you were to go with us from Shiloh and head directly north and come to the west side of the Golan Heights, you'd be up at the border with what country?
Lebanon.
Lebanon, very good. And we went to a place called Malkia,
Yes.
which the world again would refer to as a settlement, but it's simply the Israelis building a community there.
Oh, they say it's not theirs anyways.
And it was right on the border with Lebanon. And what did we do while we were there?
We planted a kiwi tree and we
Kiwi
visited
tree.
the soldiers that were on the line.
So the tour guide up there took us out to this place where there's kiwi crops growing. And right on the border, we added to the kiwi grove by planting some more kiwis.
Literally right on the border.
And literally, remember with that little path?
There's only a road that separates.
That's right. There was a fence, I think. There wasn't
Yeah, there was a fence, but there's just a road in between, a no man's zone. And you're like, they're that close.
Do you remember what, on the other side, which would be the Lebanese
Yes.
side, do you remember what he told us they were planting over there?
Drugs.
Drugs, yeah. It was marijuana or opium. I'm not sure. I think it was marijuana, but it might have been.
It was marijuana and something else.
So they're on their side of the border. They're using the land to plant drugs.
Very fertile land, by the way.
And on the Israeli side, they're planting kiwis.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, does that give you a picture of
Yeah.
two cultures?
Literally.
You know, a culture of death versus a culture of life. And from there, let's talk about that in the few minutes we got left. I think, again, we do things, and I'd encourage, would you encourage people to come to Israel with us?
Absolutely, yes.
We do things that other tours don't go. I think most tours go and they see Christian religious sites and all that.
They're not seeing the whole thing. They don't get to stay long, so they don't get to see the real, like the people. Israel's not about the Christian sites. Obviously, they're there. But what about the people that are there? You know, the people are letting you come to their land. They could say, no, we don't want any more tourists coming to our land. They could say that. So why don't you interact with the people?
Right, and that's what we did. So we're up there interacting with the people of this community, Malkia, and tourists don't go there,
Yeah.
but we did. And we also then got to go up to one of the tank divisions up in the Golan Heights and got to meet with the soldiers, the IDF soldiers. What was your impression of seeing them up there?
They're very casual. Literally, the enemy's sitting right there on the other hill. They can launch a rocket anytime they want. They're just casual, la-di-da, like this is their normal life.
That's right. And you remember we were surprised. We're up there and we're talking with the soldiers and the tank drivers, and all of a sudden one of the tank commanders comes over. Remember the really big, tall guy?
He's
And
from New Hampshire.
From New Hampshire, right? Weren't we surprised? Here he comes up and he speaks this perfect English and finds out, yeah, he made Aliyah from New Hampshire, I think just north of the border from where we are.
Yes.
And so we got to talk about what they do. We brought them some gifts.
Yes.
The IDF does not pay their soldiers very highly, and so they don't have money for a lot of extras. So we brought them some little on-the-road coffee sets that they can let up the little stove and boil themselves a pot of coffee and everything. But you and Andrew and some of the others, I think.
Yes. Jordan.
Jordan, what did you get to do?
We got to climb in the tank and actually look inside of the tank that was there. We couldn't take any pictures, obviously, but it was very interesting. Very small. It fits 3 or 4 people in one tank, which gets pretty crowded. The 4 of us were there. It was a little crowded in there. We could fit one more, but it'd be a little crowded.
Yeah, it was. So that, I mean, how many people, and especially how many young people your age, would ever get to go in the middle of a zone like that that's a hostile zone, so to speak, but actually get inside the tank and what did you think that the Israeli soldiers were they excited to see us there?
Oh, yes. Very excited to see us.
Why do you think that?
Because they don't get visitors, really, because it's a hostile area. And for us to give them support made their day.
That's right. And they, and I mean, how old were they? 18, right? 19, 20. Yeah, in that age, every Israeli serves in the IDF. And
Or does national service.
National service, right? There's certain fields that young men can go in that young women cannot go in. But by and large, the IDF is really open to a lot of professions for young ladies in the IDF. Do you know some of the things that IDF women do?
Everything except for tanks.
Everything but for tanks.
Yes.
So Israeli women can be pilots,
Yes, they can.
and they can fly combat aircraft.
Yes, they can.
Wow, and they can serve in infantry brigades.
Yes.
That's right.
No
it's
tanks.
just the tank is the
Yes.
only place that
Cannot go.
they cannot go. So young women, young men, this is part of their life. They're happy to serve their country. And so we got to be up there. But so many people in the world have been fed lies by the media about the IDF that when a group like ours goes there, they're so excited because we understand that the IDF is the most moral army in the world.
They are.
And so we were there. That was part of our trip as well. So here we are in Shiloh and Lone Marais. We're in the biblical heartland. But you said it so well, Unique, that part of our experience of Israel is to meet the people as well. So when we came down the Jordan Valley, and we'll talk about that at a later time, that was pretty exciting coming down the valley, and we're going to talk about the baptismal site where Yeshua was baptized, more than likely. We'll be talking about Hebron. We'll be talking about Jerusalem. These places in future broadcasts. But when we were coming down that valley, we stopped at a couple of places there, and got to meet some people. Actually, on our way back, we got to meet the goat lady. Do you remember that? What was that all about?
Safta wanted some goat milk, so we stopped at a goat farm, and we actually got to see some goats. They eat pretty much everything. The lady told us that during date season, they eat dates. They're eating zucchinis. We got to hold some of the baby goats, and we got to taste some of the cheese and the milk.
Yep.
It's really good.
So this was a little community right in the Jordan River Valley. Again, in a part of the world area where the world wants to give it away.
Yes.
I mean, these people have been here for 30, 40 years. This is their livelihood. See,
And it's fertile land, too.
it's fertile. And what a lot of people, Unique, don't realize is that a Palestinian state, if it's created, would make all the Jews leave.
You think they would learn from Gaza?
You would think so. Well, we'll talk about that one in a future time. But we got to meet people. We got to meet the lady and her husband, the lady selling the goats. We got to meet the elderly housing project people and what was going on there. We got to meet the rabbi in the kibbutz to find out what it's like to live in a kibbutz where they take care of you. That'll be a fun thing to talk about. We got to go to Gush Etzion and hear about that. So many places that it was really great. Well, Unique, it's been good having you on our broadcast today.
Thank you for having me.
I think you know that from Unique you can hear and catch the idea. It's a really great place to go. Join us on our next broadcast as we continue sharing about our trips to Israel.
How did I do? Your turn. Yesterday.
You did great. You did great.
Yes,
But
today.
I'm not surprised because that's a passionate subject for you, right?
Yeah.